Hello and welcome to day 55 of Geriatric 1944's Coronavirus Diaries. I've had quite a lot of correspondence about my diary in which I touched on the false allegations industry. This has been one of my bugbears, as you'll understand, for the past 20 years, since it happened to me. It was happening before that, by the way, I've often mentioned to people, if they want to examine the cases of Mick Hucknall of Simply Red and Paul Weller of The Jam, if you go to their names and stick in the word rape, you will see that both came up at the end of the year 2000, associated with a Surrey police attempt, which failed in both cases to start this whole kind of Me Too thing. I've been very worried by the fact that police and the CPS and others discovered how to use the media, especially with celebrities, in order to get convictions and bump up their budget and get promotion for senior police officers and get the CPS praised for clamping down on something. And all of this happened over false allegations. I'm not saying all allegations are false. I'm not saying there is no abuse, but there certainly is a lot of abuse going on. But the vast majority are either exaggerated and inflated or invented in sex abuse claims and charges. Anyway, I touched on that a few days ago, got loads and loads of correspondence since. Both the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, and the CCRC, the company or the body that looks at past wrongful convictions and sees whether or not they should be returned to the Court of Appeal, are examining my complaints and my cases at the moment. But I did want to just very briefly go into specifics because most people do not believe these things could happen. Just like with the coronavirus situation, most people, certainly in the UK, believe this is a plague that, if uncontrolled, will kill millions, whereas the reality is far from that. And we can see the 4 countries that fell for the media exaggeration of it, making it far worse than it is, have actually had far more deaths than the rest of the world. The UK, Italy, France and Spain have had over 30,000 deaths in each country, whereas the average for the rest of the world is 1,000. So we've got 30 times the deaths. Those deaths have been caused by the media hype and by governments falling for the media hype. But to get back to the false allegations industry, it's all linked to legal aid, of course, which is something that you're meant to be given by the government to look after your side of the story and to make sure that there is a balanced investigation into your situation. Most people simply can't afford the enormous sums that barristers and solicitors and QCs charge for such defence. So as a result, legal aid can be granted. There are certain problems with legal aid. If you get found guilty, you then have to repay the entire amount to the government. So if somebody ends up in prison, found guilty, quite often wrongly, by the way, they then find a brown envelope waiting for them saying that they owe the government £400,000, please, with the result that they have to usually sell their homes, their wives and children are out on the street. It strikes me as an extraordinary and wrong thing to happen. But also legal aid needs to be granted to take on a private investigator, for example. I was on legal aid last time. I couldn't afford all those enormous costs of barristers and solicitors and so on. So I was on legal aid and we had to apply to take on a private investigator. They're quite expensive too, by the way. And the judge did eventually allow it. But the horrible prosecutor in my case, a ghastly, appalling woman called Rosina Cottage QC, said at one point, well, what about why doesn't he sell his house? And had to be pointed out what the rules and regulations of legal aid were. You'd think at her age, she's about 90, I think. You'd think at her age she'd know about things like that, but she clearly didn't. I won't go on about prosecutors at the moment and their disgraceful behaviour in court, but we'll touch on that another day. But I was able to take on a private investigator, and thank God for that, because private investigators do things that the police ought to be doing. If the police genuinely wanted to take a balanced approach, if they genuinely believed in the prospect of innocent until proven guilty, if they wanted to check on whether the people that were making the allegations were speaking the truth or were lying or were exaggerating, they would do the things that one has to get a private investigator to do. And I had to get my private investigator to do enormous amount of things, which I have to say William Merritt, by the way, did absolutely brilliantly. And I just wanted to rattle through very quickly some of them, because I think you might be interested. At one point, we contacted one of the false accusers' mother, and he hadn't wanted that to happen, and the police had avoided doing that. The mother confirmed that actually I'd apparently phoned him at their house several times. I think this was back in 1970, because he was helping promote records. I can't remember him at all, and spoke to her. In his statement to police, he said he'd only seen me the once and had never heard or had any contact from me since then. When he discovered this about his mother, he actually went white in the witness box and almost passed out, because he knew full well that his lives would be exposed, as they indeed were. Secondly, there was another false accuser who made claims about dates and occurrences and so on involving his first girlfriend when he lost his virginity. Police failed to track down the girlfriend, although they spent several weeks trying to do so, ha. My private investigator succeeded in tracking her down, found that she was prepared to give evidence. In fact, she did a sworn affidavit and was prepared to come to court, saying that all the dates and all the details given were complete lies, and that the man, this is 50 years ago, had been a complete liar and probably still was. We also found out that that same man had been drug dealing at school and university, and we contacted several people who were prepared to say that to the court, which was also very helpful. Another of the false accusers we discovered by interviewing his neighbours and friends of years gone by had been accused by his sister of raping her when she was 12 and he was 20 on numerous occasions. The police knew all about this, but they didn't actually stop him coming forwards with his lies, and they actually were going to have the sister give evidence that he'd met me, this man. However, they decided, along with the CPS who knew all this too, they decided to drop her as a witness in the court. Of course they were going to drop her. Once the jury heard these allegations about the man having raped her several times when she was 12, they would have dismissed his false allegations against me. Things like that you can only find out if you've got a private investigator. The police should be doing these things. The CPS should actually, when they discover these things, drop these cases. But no, they all want to get convictions, and as a result, they don't. The same man, I've told you this before, actually was basically a male prostitute, worked in a major hotel way back in the early 70s or the middle 70s. And we didn't have any evidence for that, but we were pretty sure it was true. In legal argument before the trial, we said to the judge, look, we'd like to bring this up because we're certain it's true. She said, well, do you have any solid evidence? And we had to admit we didn't. So she refused to allow us to bring it up. However, when the man was being questioned in court and talking about various things, he was asked about making money. And at one point he snapped, his temper snapped, and he said, when I was working at this hotel, when he claimed 14, we proved it was 16. When I was working there, I was making £500 a week. £500 a week, by the way, in today's money is about £2,000 a week. For a 14-year-old, as he claimed, well, that sort of explained what he was doing when he was at the hotel. At that point, the judge caught my eye and looked away very quickly because that was the evidence we needed. I've made a few records about this thing, about the media inflating and exaggerating things, with the net result being sometimes it doesn't matter because the person that's being talked about is dead anyway, as happens, for example, with Jimmy Savile, Oscar Wilde, various others. But it does always do it. And I wrote this one song, got a huge amount of controversy. The media, of course, claimed I was saying that Harold Shipman, the doctor who is the worst serial killer of all time, was innocent. I never said that. I don't think he was innocent at all. But I don't think he was the worst serial killer of all time. I think that's a complete exaggeration. So see what you think when you listen to the track. The potential, I believe, true story of Harold Shipman. See you tomorrow.
Good morning to you. I want you to hear the likely true story of Harold Shipman. You'll wake in the night, you'll be shaking with fright, but for God's sakes don't fall for a media demon. Some people will sigh when they're waiting to die. Won't you please speed it up as I'm starting to cry? There's one thing he ain't, and that's savior or saint, but a pleading complaint didn't pass him by. Most people I know are not black and not white, but a blend of all colours, of darkness and light. A caricature isn't fair, isn't true. Any real human beings, part me and part you. Police will inflate, and the law says it's fine to accommodate tabloids with a solid headline. But a real psycho monster who's killing for fame would leave notes for a claim to establish his name. Good morning to you. I want you to hear the likely true story of Harold Shipman. You'll wake in the night, you'll be shaking with fright, but for God's sakes don't fall for a media demon. For God's sakes don't fall